let me paint a picture of something that doesn't exist, that will exist, and you have to trust me that it will exist, and you have to trust me that it will pay off for you, but you got to pay us in advance.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, where we look to crack the code on growing your business by tackling the challenges that keep revenue leaders up at night. I'm Karl, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into the topic of revenue reinvention. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the great team at Virtual Causeway. Imagine your sales team spending less time chasing and more time closing, because buyers already know your name before your first call. Well, that's exactly what Virtual Causeway does. They help B2B companies get found earlier in the buying process by the right people through the right channels that actually influence decisions today. The result: fewer cold motions, better conversations, and pipeline that moves faster. Make sure to check them out at virtualcauseway.com, and don't forget to mention the show for a special rate. Now, before I say anything about today's guest, because I've spoken about him many times on this podcast, and I'll say buckle up because it's a big one. This person fundamentally shaped how I look at the world of marketing from one keynote at an Eloqua conference. My guest today is Mr. Jay Baer. Jay started his career in politics, where he learned about running campaigns, learning persuasion, messaging, and how to move audiences, and it explains everything that comes after. He moved into digital marketing before most people knew what that meant, and he founded one of the first digital marketing agencies in the 90s. He built multiple companies. He advised brands like Salesforce and Oracle on customer experience and content strategy. Then he did what most advisors never do. He became the product. He wrote 7 New York Times best-selling books, including Utility. And if you've listened to the podcast before, you've heard me reference that book on multiple occasions. The idea that the difference between helping and selling is just 2 letters, that if you sell something, you make a customer today, but if you genuinely help somebody, you make a customer for life. Jay wrote that, and he lives it. Rather than staying in the lane that helped make him one of the most in-demand keynote speakers in the world, he went deep into something most of his peers would have called a hobby. After 25 years of visiting Mexico and studying how tequila is made, marketed, and sold, he built a Tequila Report, a niche media brand built around education, reviews, and a very specific audience. He did corporate tastings, distiller trips, sponsorships, a merchandise brand, hundreds of thousands of followers, multiple revenue streams, one niche, one obsession. But here's what makes the story different from every other "I followed my passion" narrative. Jay pivoted. He didn't pivot, he stacked. He took everything he built in marketing, applied it to a completely new domain, same playbook, different field. The audience that trusted him before, well, they followed him. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. How do you take a personal brand, go narrow, build real, diversified revenue without starting over? Jay, sorry that was a little long-winded, but welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, my friend. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. That's a very kind introduction. At least half of that is true. It's funny, though. This happens to me all the time now, and it totally crystallizes what you're talking about. I was on stage yesterday, like 2,000 person keynote in the grocery industry. And I walk off stage, and this guy runs up to me and is like, "You walked out there," and my brain broke because I only know you from the tequila world, and I had no idea that you were a keynote speaker or an author or a business consultant or a strategist. And I thought you were going to walk out there and talk about tequila, and all of a sudden you do this 60 minutes on AI and empathy. I could not figure out what was happening. And that happens to me all the time, like literally every week. And I'll tell you the secret. 30 plus years now in digital marketing, books, and, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of speeches. Nobody gives a shit. You make a few videos about tequila on Instagram, people stop me in hotels on the reg. So there's something to be said for consumer level product versus B2B product in terms of overall market awareness.
That's so funny. It broke when I started seeing your tequila videos, which, thank you for that, because turns out I really like tequila. Turns out my wife really likes tequila,
Another
but
convert.
only good tequila, which has become very clear in that. And I reference it all the time. Friends are going to Mexico, like, "Hey, do you got any good tequilas?" I'm like, "Here, let me show you the list, tequilareport.com." And I bring it up and they're like, "How did you find this?" I'm like, "Well, I've known Jay from a totally different world." And anyways, you and Maddy are so good together online. It's so funny. But it's great.
but you talked about stacking, and I think it's really relevant because it was something we really struggled with and I should say, we'll probably talk about this, but we didn't get into tequila as a business. It really was not intended to be that. It was purely like, wouldn't it be fun to teach some people some of the things that I've learned about tequila over the last 3 decades? It wasn't like, oh, I see a market opportunity. It wasn't that. But I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 7 companies. I can't help myself, right? It's like, do a thing, see an opportunity. Well, you got to walk through that door when the door is open. And that's kind of what happened. And we started making tequila videos and they were terrible and nobody watched them. And then we got better and then people started to watch them and then on and on and on. And I'm like, okay, well, I can see how this business could be a business. And then we turned it into a business. And now, we have lots of subscribers to Tequila Report. We work with 32 different tequila brands as consultants. Wow. Not to mention the media side of it. So it is an actual business. It is a mid 6 figures business on its own, which for just me and Maddy is a pretty nice little business. So, but it wasn't set up to be that way. And it's funny when you have to have that conversation with yourself that says, I could turn this passion into a business. Is that a thing I want to do? Because there's no question that your relationship with that passion changes when you start to care about the money side of it. And that was a very, I don't want to say difficult, but a meaningful sort of conversation to have with myself and with Maddy, who's now my business partner, about, hey, do we want to make this something other than just pure joy? Because it does become less joyful when you're like, hey, we got to make invoices and stuff.
Yeah. I draw a parallel to that of sports because I played football. I don't know how much you know about that, but you go from playing the game and then you get paid to play the game and it changes and how you approach it. And when you walk through the door, it's very different than what you did when you played in university or college, and it changes. But I will say the one thing, I'll ask this and I know we'll jump in, or we can jump in, but with Maddy, it seems like she has evolved her admiration for tequila along the way. At the beginning, it did seem like she really liked it.
For sure, and that's why we did it. So from the very beginning, so I did not expect it to be a business, but I am a professional marketer, right? So even as a hobby, you're not just going to like blindly do it. At least I wouldn't. So our initial observation, I think there's a lesson here for a lot of folks in terms of your overall addressable market. In the speaking business, right? There's a very common saying that people talk about a lot called there's riches in the niches. And it is very true in all sort of content driven businesses. Most people who are trying to use utility or content in any way, it's not that they're too narrow, it's that they're too broad. It's the 1,000 true fans approach, really. So when Maddy and I first started making videos, and actually it wasn't her, it was just me initially, that's why they were so bad. My observation was approximately 40 million Americans will consume at least one cocktail this month that contains tequila. So that's your total addressable market. Más o menos 40 million. There's an application, another website in the industry called Agave Matchmaker, which is the database of reviews. It is like the encyclopedia of tequila. It's not a magazine like we are. It's literally like a database. They have approximately 400,000 users ever. So the nerd audience is 400,000. The total audience is 40 million. As a marketer, my plan was always to serve the larger audience, which is why, while we definitely try to be as educational as possible about tequila, we don't tell people everything we know because most people don't care that much, right? They don't want that much information. And so we don't want to be the playground of the tequila nerd audience. We want to be the place where people like you and your wife who are just getting into it. We want to be your like freshman, sophomore, maybe first semester of your junior year sort of tequila resource. And once you graduate, please graduate and go hang out with the other nerds. And so back to your question, Maddy used to intern for me at my consulting firm, Convince and Convert, before I sold it. And so I knew her through that. And when I sold the company, I went from having like 25 direct reports to 0 direct reports. I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. I need to have somebody to help me. And she was just graduating. I said, "Do you have a job yet?" "No." "How would you like to work for me to do whatever we decide you should do?" "Fine." And so not long after that, I started making videos. And then I said to her, "Do you drink tequila?" She's like, "No, I occasionally would drink a margarita." I'm like, "You're perfect." So I said, here's the question. I said, "Would you be willing?" Because she's very camera shy. You wouldn't know it, but she is. "Would you be willing to do one video?" And she said, "Okay, you're my boss." And 600 videos later, she gets recognized all over the country. But you're exactly right. As the audience got wiser, she got wiser right along with them. So from the very beginning, my strategy was Maddy is the audience, right? She's the audience on camera. And as I'm teaching her, the audience is learning right along with her. And it's been really effective. My good friend Rory Vaden, who is perhaps the best personal branding strategist in the world, has a saying that I really took to heart when we started the Tequila Project, and still think about this every week. You'll love this, Karl. He says, "Your ideal audience is the person you used to be."
Mm. Hmm.
Which I really love, right? It's like you've learned a bunch of things about things, right? About revenue generation, revenue problem solving. Your ideal audience is the person you used to be before you knew all that stuff.
That is landing very well, because that's how this whole topic came up. It was, you ask questions and you start to learn things and you're solving problems. And as a leader, I think most people can attribute to, or attach themselves to this. You're looking to solve a problem, but then if it's a new problem, you go, "Oh, maybe I haven't solved this before." Or you step into a new role and you go, "I've never seen this.
Yeah.
I don't know this part of the movie. Maybe I should ask other people." And then they help give you guidance.
Well, I've written 7 books, as you mentioned, and every single book was written the same way and for the same reason. Throughout all of those books, I was running a large consulting firm.
Mhm.
And what would happen would be I'd be in meetings with clients or prospective clients, and I'd try to be an active listener. And I would hear clients, many of whom were the biggest companies in the world, right? We weren't working with, a dog groomer. It was like the United Nations and Nike. And these really, really smart people would ask questions. And I would think, well, look, if the person running marketing for Nike doesn't know the answer to this, probably nobody knows the answer to this. And then I would conduct a lot of first party research into a particular topic, take that research, and then build a formula, a recipe for solving that particular problem. And then I would create a speech about those answers. I would do that speech 25 times. And at the conclusion of each speech, I would say, "Hey, I think I'm going to write a book about this. If you have any stories or examples that you think are particularly appropriate or resonant about this topic," which could have been content marketing or social media or social business or customer service or word of mouth or other topics that I've covered, "come up to me after the speech and tell me your story." And so I would do that. And one of the things that I'm known for in my written work is having case studies and stories that nobody's ever heard of before. And it's because the audience gave them all to me, right? You're not going to find Amazon or Starbucks or whatever because everybody knows those stories. It's this weird guy who ran a moving company in California. I didn't know that story. An audience member told me that story. So every single time I come up with a new topic, and tequila, I think of as sort of just a new topic, it's because I saw a pattern of questions that nobody was answering yet. And in tequila, it was, there's so many tequilas on the market. Which one should I drink? And so we built a company to do that.
Yeah, and I go to it. I was telling Jay before we hit start, or before we hit record. It's something I go to because in Canada we don't get the same tequilas that you get in the U.S. When we go to Mexico, they bring different ones out, or you ask the bartenders at the resort, "Hey, what do you have?" And then you go through the airport and you see what they have there, and you just try to make good decisions. And then you start to see the additives and non-additives, and then what are the flavors you like and where do they come from, and they're all different. And it can be the same brand, but it comes from a different place, and the notes are a little bit different, or the soil is different. And so there's so much to learn about such a complex spirit that when you say tequila, I don't know, I probably leaning into your audience here a little bit from the beginning, but when somebody said tequila to me, I thought of Jose Cuervo Gold, and I remember at
Sure.
the bar, and that was what I remember. But I didn't know of the levels and the depths. And you start to look at the comparisons between tequila and even like scotch or whiskey,
Mhm.
and how the depths of flavors and how how they're treated and everything. It's so different.
Yeah, one of the things that's powered the tequila boom in the last few years is people moving over from brown liquors, right? From whiskey, bourbon, scotch, and kind of getting into tequila, which uses a lot of the same barreling, so it's a familiar flavor profile in aggregate for people. So it's certainly been part of it. And yeah, I mean, when you say tequila, most people had that one night in college, right? And that's sort of when their interest waned dramatically. And so we try to get people past that. It's really fun to we do a lot of tours in Mexico of distilleries. In fact, we've got one coming in July with Tequila Report. So if you want to come or anybody else wants to come, go to the website, look it up. And it's really fun to take people who are not really well versed in it to actual distilleries and do the tastings and see how it's made and meet the producers. It's amazing. And Maddy, my business partner, came from no knowledge, and I took her with me to distillery visits 11 times in like 18 months. So she went from no knowledge to visiting more than 25 different distilleries in Mexico, and it was definitely a crash course. And now she knows lots of things.
That's awesome. Um, how we got to today. So I like to ask everybody, but I think you kind of said this. I like to ask all the guests is like, what industries and verticals do you work in? Selling motions, what size
Mhm.
companies? But you kind of gave that a little bit away. Big brands, you know.
Yeah, well, it's a hard question for me to answer because on the speaking side, right, which is still a larger share of my overall revenue is professional speaking. I'll do 45, 50 keynotes this year. And so in that world, the customer is actually the meeting planner. In truth, the audience is obviously the customer of the meeting planner.
Mhm.
But what's amazing about that business and why I love it so much is I have to learn just enough to be dangerous about a different industry every week. Right. So this week was grocery. Next week is auto body collision repair. The week before was global pharma. Right. And so every week is a different industry. And that as a longtime consultant, that opportunity and requirement to learn about a business enough to tell them what they should do is really fun. It's really a gift. So those companies will vary in size, of course, based on the audience, but they're typically decent enough size to have a professional speaker at my level come in and write that check. So it's usually medium size to global enterprise end user clients on that side. And then on the tequila side, it's the exact opposite because we've got all these brands that we work with either as consultants and or as the media company. And the craft tequila brands, the ones that you're starting to drink now, thank you, are very small, like way smaller than people think, Karl. Like a lot of these tequila brands have like 4 employees or 6 employees. In many cases, my annual revenue is bigger than the annual revenue of the brand. And
Wow.
that was a real challenge for Maddy and I when we started doing tequila consulting because we came from big company consulting, right? And we had to like really change all of our sales motions and our customer support motions and even our billing and AR and AP motions because it's a very different style when companies are that small, right? And it's basically the owners are running the whole thing. So that took us a little while. I hadn't worked with small business for quite some time, and it took a while to kind of be like, oh yeah, I remember these guys run like they're me, not like they're a massive publicly traded corporation. So that was a different learning for us for sure.
It's really interesting that you say it that way, because I didn't put the two together. And I'm even thinking of like, I see the videos you come up with, and one of the ones that this obviously, hopefully you can tell that there's no sponsorship here or anything, but I mean, Tequila Ocho has become one of our
Mhm.
favorites, and
Yeah,
so we have different ones. And but
it's great.
like for you to say that, I think Tequila Ocho, like, do they have like 10 employees now, or like,
Well, that's
anyways?
a little bit different because Tequila Ocho is actually owned by a spirits conglomerate. So they are now Ocho itself, that brand by itself. I don't want to speak totally out of turn, but I'm going to say they have all in 100 people,
Wow.
maybe something
Huh.
like that. No, but they're owned by, by a bigger company, that owns whiskey brands and scotch brands and vodka brands and, all the things, right? So
Mhm.
so they've got corporate resources behind them that most tequila brands don't. A brand like G4,
Mm.
which is a very fast growth craft tequila, might have 75 employees.
Really? I
But
can't find that one. I keep
they're a top.
looking for it, Jay.
Well,
I can't find it.
they just pulled out of Canada. That's why. Um, but some of these smaller brands, like, I don't know, a brand like Lágrimas del Valle, which is a really, really excellent brand, made in the Tequila Valley. They do a lot of things like Ocho, where they make batches from agave from different fields.
Mhm.
They probably have 6 people
6.
total.
Huh.
So when we're selling, one of the things that we had to change from a revenue standpoint is on the tequila side, we're always pitching owners, not staff, right? Not marketing directors, not head of strategy. It's these people own it. And the tequila business is incredibly difficult. Most people are not going to make money until or unless they sell the brand. Very few tequila brands, especially craft tequila brands, make money month over month, quarter over quarter. Most of them have venture capital behind them, whether it's friends and family capital or a little bit more savvy capital. And so to say, hey, Maddy and I can help you accomplish X if you pay us Y, that's a tricky conversation, right? Because it's real money for them. Like it's a
Mhm.
meaningful investment. Like these brands are small enough that like what they pay Tequila Report for a sponsorship is literally like a line item called out in the spreadsheet. It's not just like under the marketing budget,
Mhm.
So it's a different it's a different motion when the money really matters, and that's so different than the rest of my career, where we're pitching Sam's Club on a strategic plan, where what they're paying us for the strategic plan is like literally a rounding error of a rounding error, right?
Right.
Like it doesn't even it's immaterial, and it's not the person who hired me. It's not their money, right? They're a marketing
Mhm.
director. They don't really care how much we're charging them within reason. So it's a really different way to sell, and I like it, right? I am a small business, but it definitely took some adjustment.
So it's a perfect segue because like how we got to the topic is I asked Jay, like everybody, what's a successful revenue initiative you've ever led or an existing
Yeah,
revenue initiative you ever solved or solving? And it became clear is building a revenue around niche, which is everything that we've sort of led
yeah.
up to today. And so I think we sort of teased this out a little bit, but most people pick a niche based on market size. And you clearly said that that you looked at it in a couple of different aspects, but you picked one also based on a little bit of I don't want to say obsession, but um, a passion. How do you know the difference between a passion that became a business and one that should stay a hobby?
I think it's I don't know. The answer is I don't know.
Oh,
Because it's a very personal decision. It's not for everybody. Turning your hobby into a business is not for everybody because as we talked about, by definition, ipso facto, you're going to like it less when there's money involved.
mhm.
You just are. It's not going to be as fun when you're thinking about we got clients and we got invoices and we got deadlines, right? You're not just freestyling. And that change, which is palpable, is not for everybody. So I don't recommend it to everybody. Now, I think it's possible for everybody. I think it is always possible to turn your hobby into a profession, especially now where you can just create good episodic content, whether it's in Instagram or a podcast like this one or books or any other format. If you're truly useful, if you're truly helping somebody, if you're truly embracing the utility philosophy and you do it consistently enough over time and with the right mindset, the money will come. Like you'll get paid to do that. There's no question in my mind.
Mhm.
Now, as I've also talked about in the past, it's not a meritocracy, right? Or maybe it is a meritocracy. Like just because you want to educate people and you put the time into it, doesn't mean you'll be as successful as the other person, because some people are better on camera. Some people are better on the microphone. Some people, I mean, it's not, there is some level of skill and talent and charisma associated with any kind of content driven business. Clearly, you don't see a lot of like super ugly TikTok influencers, right? There's a reason for all of that. But you can always turn your hobby into a business, especially now. It's just whether you should. And whether you should isn't really about business. It's about what will that do to your actual love for your hobby. And that's a personal decision that I don't think you can actually really answer appropriately until you do it. And then you just have to say, do I regret this? Or am I really happy that I did this?
Yeah. So what does that journey look like for you? Because, you, like you said, you've launched all these things. You're an entrepreneur at heart. You took this Tequila report, which I think you changed the model from what you've typically done, right? Like you went revenue playbook first versus utility first. How did that journey change the way that you brought it to market?
Well, so first, when we started the Tequila project, again, it wasn't a business. It was like, let's make some videos. That would be fun. And they were bad, and then they got good. And then we developed an audience. And then people started to approach us and say, hey, would you want to review our tequila or talk about tequila, and we'll pay you some money? And so we monetize it a little bit. And then we decided to monetize it in a much more organized way, where we built a program, and this was for 2025. We built a program that combined promotional videos on behalf of tequila brands with a consulting package, right? So everybody was in it for a year, and you get consulting and videos. Now, this is very different from how everybody else in our industry does it. Every other person who does tequila content is like, okay, I'll make you a video for X dollars, right? It's very transactional. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, no, I know I've been doing this a long time, especially on the B2B side. We're not doing it that way. If you're not working for us for a year, we're not working for you at all. And if you're not in this for the whole package, we're not interested, right? So we told a lot of people no, so that we could tell the right people yes. People who want to have a real relationship with Maddy and myself in multiple facets. So that was 2025's program. And then for this year, 2026, we decided a couple of things. One, I'm spending like half my time in Mexico now, and it's very difficult to shoot videos there for a lot of reasons. And Maddy's trying to start a family. So pregnant lady drinks tequila on camera, not really an awesome calling card. And so we decided that we had to change what we had been doing, which is make videos and completely, upend the entire business model. And at the same time, there's lots of people now who make videos on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube about tequila, but there's fundamentally no long form written narrative storytelling, almost none. They're like, okay, I'm a writer. Like, let's think about building a magazine that has a shelf life, that somebody can follow, that has a URL, that has a newsletter. The problem with all the short form social media content, it's really impactful, obviously, and people love to scroll, but it's so ephemeral, right? It's like gone, watch it, gone, right? So we're like, let's get something with a little bit more like heft and weight. But to build out tequilareport.com, which is a very robust website with an email platform and an e-commerce platform and a merchandise store and a lot of other sort of ornaments on the Christmas tree, the investment to do that was significant. And so unlike usually what we do, which is make things and then sell things, we said we need to sell things and then make things. And this is the first time I've done this in 35 years. So we actually put together some motions, pretty compelling pitch deck, and engaged in, I think we did 44 1-hour pitch calls in 45 days.
Wow.
Each one of the different tequila brand and their owners. And we said, okay, some people knew us well, some people knew us a little bit, some just knew us by reputation. Said, what you probably don't know is that, before we got into tequila, we ran the third largest marketing blog in the world. We had 100 writers writing for us at one point. Like, we know how to build a scaled media company. We're going to do that for tequila. We want you along with us. We have 24 slots for 2026, period. That's all we're going to have. Here's what those packages include. We would love for you to be a part of it. And every 2 weeks is a different sponsor. And whoever signs their contract first gets first pick of when their sponsorship is. So if you've got a special release coming in September and you want to be a sponsor in September, you better get your contract back. Otherwise, I can't promise you September. It might be some other time. So we had some scarcity, right? And some forcing functions around speed of return. And it almost killed us, but we did it. So we had all of 2026 sold out for the website before we made 1 pixel of the website. Which is probably the most successful revenue initiative I've ever undertaken, not by sheer revenue size, but in terms of like, let's just invent a thing that doesn't exist and get it fully sold out before it ever existed.
That's amazing. And there's definitely a story here, like I think from Parallels, and I more so because when you niche down, like you said, like niches are in the riches, and Sangram is one that likes to talk about that one regularly. I have to imagine that trying to pitch those 45 tequila companies is not the easiest thing to do to find information on, because I don't think those owners are on LinkedIn.
They are, but they never update anything, right? So, yeah.
So there's a question here of how did you...
easy. That part was easy because we know the brands, right? And so we either know them or they know us, or we could get to them through somebody. So the process, like the potential prospect pool, that part was actually easy. It was like knowing who we're going to pitch. It's getting the pitches set up and like agreeing to the meeting and getting the times coordinated, because these folks are always out in the field, going to bars and restaurants and pitching tequila, or in Mexico. Right. So scheduling with that particular type of customer is very challenging. And so getting everybody on Zoom was really hard. And then the other part, which is obviously hard, is let me paint a picture of something that doesn't exist that will exist, and you have to trust me that it will exist, and you have to trust me that it will pay off for you. But you got to pay us in advance, because we made everybody pay us up front before it even existed. So that required a little bit of like future casting. And I'm not a salesperson by training, but I certainly was a salesperson by activity during that stretch.
So did you have to do all of the outreach and everything, or was Maddy helping, or did you have somebody else out? Like, how did you get all those meetings set up?
Yeah. So usually I would make the first contact and then say, hey, here's what we want to do, limited opportunity, and you got to act fast. And Maddy's going to set it up. And so Maddy would get it scheduled, would work on all the calendars. And, I'm still traveling the whole time to give speeches, right? So it was really challenging to get them all set up. And we would there was days where we would do 6 or 7 hour-long pitches back to back to back. And I'm used to that kind of pace, but Maddy's not. It almost killed her.
It is a lot, because you're jumping, that pivot and shift is hard.
Yeah.
And there are some questions inside of here of like, because you had your personal, and I think there's probably helps, like you have your personal brand, your background, but you've also had some pivots. Then there's the entrepreneurship, you have the content creation and everything. So how did you take all of that into shifting into this tequila world without dropping the speaking stuff? Because it sounds like you have so many things on the go. So how are you juggling all the balls to make sure the speaking continues, the tequila stuff is going and it's thriving? And how does that dictate your time?
Yeah, it's not easy at all, because one is circumstantial and the other is the exact opposite. So on the tequila side, especially now that we're running a magazine, not just videos, we have a new newsletter every other Tuesday, and we publish 15 pieces of content every other Tuesday. And then we have some other content in between. And then the social media promotion, all those kind of things, but it's very calendared out. So I can tell you what we're going to write for like the next 2 months. So it's just like a regular magazine would be. So you have a very strict editorial calendar. We're working way ahead on things, setting up interviews and working with our team of reviewers and all those kind of things. And then meanwhile, working with the clients to make sure they're happy. Maddy does a lot of that, thankfully. She does a lot of client service work. But it's we know on this day we have to have this done, because a week from now we have to have this done, right? So it's pretty much the same every week now that we have this system. Now, again, we've only been doing this for 10 weeks. It's that new. So, but we have it to the point now where we kind of have a flywheel. Speaking is the exact opposite, because there's weeks where I have 3 speeches, and so I'm gone the entire week. So I'm literally not in the office at all. And then there's weeks where I might have a week off, where I'm in the office the whole time. So for me, and I've been doing this now, I've been speaking that I've traveled 48 weeks a year for 22 years in a row.
Wow.
And as part of that, you just get used to figuring it out, right? It's like, okay, in order to do this and hit this deadline, and my rule is we never miss a deadline. Even when I ran the consulting firm, I'm like, we'll mess other things up, but we will never miss a deadline. And we never did in 16 years. In order to make that happen, you just got to figure it out. And if that means you're working Saturdays and working Sundays and working on planes and working in the back of the Uber, then that's just what you do. I'm fortunate in that I don't need like absolute quiet to get work done. And I've learned this over time. I didn't know this to be true, but I think it is true now. I'm disproportionately good at being able to switch gears. So I can go from this podcast to writing an article about tequila to working on slides for next week's speech without any drop in effectiveness or productivity. I don't need a minute to regather my thoughts. I can literally just turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. And that's always been like that since I was a kid. I realize now that that's kind of freaky, but I didn't know that for a long time.
Yeah, that's hard because even as a leader, when you're going into having multiple, I found for me personally that pivot and shift. I got to pivot my mentality and shift into that next thing and go, okay, catch me up on where I am. Like I found that to be, I still find it challenging of like, because you want to be present for them, but also where were we? Who are they? What are they doing? Where does it come? So if you have that superpower, lean into it.
Yeah, it's a good one to have. And that's why when I bring people onto my team, now it's just Maddy and I, but even before when I had a bigger team, a lot of it is can this person, well, first of all, we have one rule, both for personnel and for clients. And we've been fortunate enough to be in the position to say no to potential clients for many, many years. The first rule is no assholes. Like we don't work with people we don't like, period, and we won't. Like we don't care. We turn tequila brands down all the time just because we don't like the people. Like I'm not, I've worked too hard and I don't care enough about money to work with people I don't like. Full stop. So that's rule one. Rule two is, can this person keep up? Right? Like, I'm always juggling knives, and if somebody can't multitask or topic shift pretty well, that's just not going to be a good fit.
Which makes a lot of sense. The pivot and shift, if you take a couple of minutes, it's great. But have somebody, there's been people on our team, it's like, look, I can do this one thing, but then I need to go take a half an hour break and collect my thoughts, and I need another half an hour to get, like, that just doesn't work because you need a speed and efficiency.
And it's challenging because the speaking business and the tequila business are tied together only because I'm in both of them. But there isn't a lot of Venn diagram in terms of what we do, for who we do it, how it works, the dynamics of it, the customers. There's just not a lot of parallels there. So it really is running two companies. We do try to tie it together though. So this is like the perfect storm for me. And I've got 2 of these coming up in April where I'll come and do a keynote speech, but then they'll have me do a tequila tasting and education class.
Oh, that's cool.
The sponsors of the event, the executives, their big clients, their potential clients, right? So then I get to actually, dip my beak in both ponds in the same event. I love that. It's super fun.
That creates an entirely different experience. You walk away, I got to see this guy on stage. He taught me something, and then he taught me something totally different that like I'll remember for the rest of my life.
Yes. And it's a great differentiator too, because even if speaking clients don't hire me for it, we talk about it a lot and they remember it, because there's a lot of people who can give a competent presentation, but there's nobody who can give a competent presentation and a tequila class at this level. So it's a nice differentiator and kind of a marketing hook for me.
Did you have any challenge from working with brands when you said, hey, I'm a tequila aficionado, etc. I live in Indianapolis. I think you still live in Indianapolis, but maybe I'm wrong. I live in Indianapolis. I'm a tequila fan. I can help you with your branding. Did you have any pushback?
It's a great question. My agent, I have an agent on the speaking side, was like, I don't know that we should talk about this. And I get it, right? But my perspective was, look, I wrote the best-selling book, co-wrote the best-selling book ever on word of mouth marketing. The memorability we gain from being the tequila guy speaker far outweighs the very small number of clients who are like, he's not my guy because he's also in the tequila business. And that has proven to be true for sure. I knew that to be true. That was my instinct, and it was accurate. But there have been, in the last 4.5 years since we started doing tequila aggressively, there's probably been 3 potential clients that I know of, right? Who are like, yeah, not my guy. Now, there could be many more. I don't actually know the numbers on this, and I couldn't know, who went to the website and they were going to think about hiring me, but then they saw I did tequila too, and they said, no, not our guy, because we're a church or very conservative or whatever. That could be happening, but we're plenty happy with the number of speeches that we're doing.
Which is great. And I think the underlying question I should have tried to ask is, like, when I have to think that most of the tequila aficionados come from Mexico, but you're coming from the other side of the border, saying, like, here's how it goes. Was there any challenge for you to break into that world?
It's funny. So mostly aficionados actually come from the US, for a lot of reasons. There's way more and better tequila in the US than in Mexico, which I know is the height of irony. It's all made in Mexico. There's almost no tequila education in Mexico. So Mexicans don't know about craft tequila or additive-free tequila or any of the things that we talk about in the US tequila community. They don't know and they don't care. It's very different. However, we get complaints and like just sometimes really, really negative comments all the time, especially from Mexican Americans who say, my Tio Manuel, who grew up in Nogales, taught me about tequila. Who are you gringos from Indiana to tell me what tequila is good to drink? Like, we get that all the time. But it's not unique to Maddy and I. All the tequila content creators in the category who are Americans get some level of that blowback from time to time. But we just ignore it because we know that those people don't actually know what they're talking about. So it is what it is.
It's interesting that the people there's not a lot of education about it in the place that it's from.
I know it is both surprising, slightly disappointing, but it's just sort of a cultural norm. And partially because there's not that many tequilas for sale in Mexico. Not nearly as many as in the US because of the taxation rate in Mexico. Tequila is extremely expensive for Mexicans in Mexico. It's like a 67% tax applied to spirits there, where in the US it's 13% or something. So it's there's a lot of reasons why it's true, but I live in Mexico about half the time now, and one of the reasons I can't do reviews there is I can't get the tequilas I would review. They don't exist in Mexico.
But you can visit the location to see how it's actually created.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're taking a totally different view.
There's not in a store, for example.
So you're looking at it from like, hey, I'm going to show you how the sausage is made, but then I'm going to actually show you the sausage when I'm back on home soil. So
exactly. I can't get the sausage, unfortunately. Yeah. It's a little weird. People think that it's like, isn't all the tequila in Mexico? I'm like, it's all made in Mexico, but it's not sold in Mexico. That's the weird thing.
Which is really strange.
Mm-hmm.
But just looking at the time, Jay, I told you we'd get you out of here, and we're pretty well at the top of the hour. So I'm sorry. I'm sure
whatever you need. I can do this all day.
Maybe I'll ask one more question. What was the core aspect of your business models from all of your learnings that you had when you stepped into the world of tequila to say, look, here's what we're going to do. We're really going to focus on a niche. I'm going to add another portfolio I'm going to add another thing to my portfolio and ensure that nothing falls. How did you make that conscious decision and ensure that everything's going to be running smoothly so that you have multiple revenue streams?
What we do differently than anybody else in the tequila category, fundamentally, is that kind of treat it like a media company. And even when we were just making videos, not the magazine, we would have every video planned out 75 days in advance. So brands would come to us and say, hey, we're interested in working with you. Can you make a video in 2 weeks? Like, nope. We can make a video in 3 months. And most other people are like, sure, I'll make a video today. And so for me, because I always have so many things that I'm trying to accomplish, I've got to know way far in advance what those things are going to be, so we can work backwards, so we never drop the ball and never miss a deadline. And so that kind of episodic, turn it into a process has served me really well, because I go about it the same way, whether it's a consulting deliverable or a speech deliverable or a book deliverable or a magazine deliverable or a video deliverable. It's got to be processed, right? And we got to say, all right, got to do this first, this second, this third, this fourth. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of revenue generators, right? Where they think of things like a campaign instead of like a process. And when you say, all right, let's treat this like something that we're going to repeat over and over and over and over, and put those kind of motions in place, you end up with better outcomes. It takes a little more work initially to do it that way, but if you can stick to it, you'll be much better off medium and long term.
I like to use the term simple is very hard. And if you created the simple process, but that's because, and I really like that, you treat it like a process, not a campaign, because that's something that I've had to learn about, even doing the podcast of, you're going to post to multiple places and how does it go, but you have to have a process so you know exactly what's going on. So
yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes is there's a 17th century mathematician, Blaise Pascal, who said, I would have written a shorter letter, but I did not have time. Which I think is so true, right? It's difficult to do it tight, and sometimes it's worth the investment to come up with a motion that can be repeated forever, and staying organized and not getting behind, is I think what not only allows you to get more done ultimately, but also prevents you from freaking out. When people feel behind, when they feel stressed, when they feel like, oh, I didn't get accomplished what I was supposed to, that's when they start getting anxious. And that almost never yields outcomes, especially in revenue generation. Yeah, clients can smell fear. They can smell desperation. They can smell when you're behind. They can smell when it's not going as well as you thought it should. They can smell that the same way that dogs can smell fear. So the more organized you can stay, the more ahead of the curve you can stay, the more clients will be able to intuit that. And the more they'll be willing to trust you.
Yeah, it's a great way to say it, because it is true. If you follow your process and you know exactly what you're supposed to do next, well, then it's just the next step in the process. Not, I don't know what I'm doing because I've got too many balls and I don't know which one to focus on. Yep. Trying to get you out of here, Jay. I like to ask everybody at the end. Everybody likes new and nobody likes different. And well, you did both at the same time, new and different. So for somebody thinking about adding an additional revenue stream or even a product to their portfolio, what are 2 or 3 actionable things that you could say, you can look at these things or do these things so you can be successful with adding that new thing?
People ask me all the time, like, what's the hot new thing? And I always have the same answer, which sounds trite, but I really believe it. The hot new thing is doing today's thing better. And so I would encourage people, before they say, all right, let's pursue this new idea, to say, have we actually executed the existing idea as well as we possibly can? And almost invariably, the answer is no. It is easier to start a new thing in many cases than it is to optimize an old thing. It's also more psychologically seductive. So as somebody who's been in digital since domain names were free, the ability to iterate and test and optimize and tweak and improve incrementally over time is a big secret to whatever measure of success I've been able to have. And I encourage everybody to not run away from that opportunity in pursuit of the new thing. Because usually, if you put the same kind of effort into the new thing as you could into optimizing the existing thing, you'll probably end up with better outcomes and lower risk. But it's not as fun to do that, so people don't want to do that.
That's a great piece of advice. To get you out of here, where can people want to learn more? Where can people find you?
Well, as we talked about, I got 2 businesses that are kind of different, so you got to go to 2 different places. Sorry about that. If you go to jaybaer.com, just my name, Jaybaer, that's all things speaking in books and such. And if you go to tequilareport.com, you will find our consumer magazine. If you go to tequilareport.com/subscribe, you will get the magazine sent to your email box at no cost every other Tuesday. We'd love to have you. We got 51,000 subscribers and counting.
Wow, it's awesome, and this has been a lot of fun to do this, and I like, I'm genuine when I said to Jay, like, you've influenced my tequila world, and I say that with all sincerity, and even just looking at some of the when my son has gone and to Mexico, and I said, hey, bring this one home. Can you find this one? He's like, I can't find that one. I don't know where to go. But
well, and that's why. Now you know why.
That's why. Before we go, Jay, I want to make sure that I share my appreciation to you, because I've only ever had the chance to meet you once in person. Well, let's call it twice. The Eloqua event, I don't know if I can count that as a meeting, because my mind was blown when I physically was writing down the letters. But but you're somebody who's changed my world about marketing, and utility is a book that I go back to regularly and I read. Hug Your Haters is also on the list as well, and I've become an avid reader of your report as well.
Thank you.
And my wife also likes it too. So I look to you for inspiration, for insights into marketing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here today, and for what you do for the world of marketing and branding.
It's very kind of you to say. I really appreciate that. It was absolutely my pleasure. We'll do it again. And seriously, look at your calendar. We'd love to have you and your wife or anybody else join us on our trip to visit Tequila Distilleries in July.
Okay, I hope my wife doesn't actually listen to this one, because she'll be like, okay, we're booking it, we're going. So she's already asking, when are we going, when are you taking the next trip?
I'm coming too, so I'll be there.
Nice.
It's going to be a blast. We'll do it.
Well, that's going to wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. I obviously want to thank you, Jay, for sharing these incredibly valuable insights. There's some strategies you can put into action. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Until next time, it's Karl with Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn your obstacles into your opportunities. Thanks for investing your time today, and see you on the next episode.